Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Taking the Edge Off the Middle East, a series of casual conversations that offer up rare insider knowledge on the most important events in the broader Middle East and why it matters to America today. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share with your friends. I'm Brian Katulis. I'm host of the podcast and senior fellow here at the Middle East Institute. And today I'm joined by Elliott Abrams, senior fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations and chairman of the Vandenberg Coalition. Elliott, welcome to Middle East Institute, and let's take some edge off the Middle East.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Howdy. I'm trying to reintroduce the phrase howdy. You know the origin of howdy?
No.
I thought it was Southern Texas and, like Westerns. You're of the
you do.
How do ye do? It's from England.
Really?
Yeah. So just a little odd. I used to do a thing here at MEI. What do you know? What's an odd fact? And that's one thing that I learned today.
How do you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get into it. We got a lot of ground to cover because you have, in addition to your current positions, which I've named, a vast experience going back, 40? Almost 50 years?
50 years would be 1975. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly 50 years.
I moved to Washington in 1975.
We're going to get into that. Where I want to start is where we are today. And we're recording this in mid-September.
Mm-hmm.
Because of our cycle and things like this is coming out actually on October 7th, which we'll get into. It's the second anniversary of Hamas's attack on Israel. But more or less, we're about almost 8 months into the second Trump administration. And I want to start out with the bigger picture question. And you're a distinguished foreign policy expert, served many administrations and on the Hill. What's the headline of Trump's foreign policy so far? What would you say, not just on the Middle East, but the overall, What's he doing good? What's the impact?
I would say uncertainty, a lot of incoherence, outcome in doubt.
And would you say, because you served as special envoy on Iran and Venezuela in the first term, is it qualitatively different? And if so, how?
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's a lot of truth to this notion that Trump didn't expect to be elected the first time. He didn't have a team.
Yeah.
Therefore, he pretty much used the Republican Party team and a lot of generals. This time around, he does have a team. They're in there. And so the administration is more Trumpy. A lot of the people, I guess you could call Republicans, who would have been in any Republican administration, like me, are not in this time.
Did you want to be?
No. But I did want to be last time.
Okay.
And I think, I think this time is, if I can, in one word, worse. There's less party politics in it, and I mean that in the positive sense. That is that adhering to Republican Party traditional views and principles, and there's just less coherence.
Yeah,
and we'll get into this, but on a lot of questions, people say, before we get to the policy, tell me how you think the policy was made. What's the process? And I don't think there is a process.
Yeah, I have a friend, you probably know him, a Middle East diplomat who will remain unnamed. He said that with Democrats, you get all process and no outcome. And with Republicans and Trump in particular, you get outcome but no process. But again, the headline.
Yeah.
Well, on the bigger picture, he promised ending the war in Ukraine in a day. He promised a lot of things. I don't know what you make of his 6-7 deals that he says he's executed peace between India and Pakistan, Congo and Rwanda and all of this, but beyond the chaos, is there sort of a substantive, is it the economic tariff wars that he's prosecuting? Like what's the North Star in this administration?
Well, the North Star for him would be American interest, right? America first.
Yeah.
And some of the things he's doing to do that, I think, deserve to be thought through. I mean, it's reasonable to, for example, look at our economic relations with China over the last few decades and say, wait a minute. Are we really benefiting from this?
Yeah.
I'm in favor of that. But I think a lot of what's being done can't genuinely be explained as actually being in the American interest. And the best example here would be Ukraine and Russia. I mean, how is it in our interest to allow Putin to continue what he's doing in Ukraine without pushing back much harder? Now, maybe Trump will, maybe by October, November, December, you'll see a change. He is talking about additional sanctions on Russia.
Right.
But why does it take 9 months? Why does it take a year to get to that conclusion?
And do you have an answer to that or no? I mean, is it pure MAGA internal politics? Is it Laura Loomer? What's
No,
going on?
I think a lot of it is Trump himself.
Uh-huh.
That is, I think he actually does believe that with Kim Jong-un, with Xi Jinping, with Putin, with the Gulf leaders, his own personal relationship is central and critical.
Right.
And it may be in the Gulf, actually, in several cases. But in the case of Putin and Xi Jinping, these are highly disciplined communist leaders. I mean, whatever you want to say about Putin, he came out of the KGB.
Right.
He knows what he's doing. He's doing it in a disciplined fashion. The notion that he would change anything for Donald Trump is, I think, silly.
Yeah. Do you have a big disappointment about the second Trump administration so far? I mean, you mentioned chaos, but in terms of outcomes, I wrote a few weeks ago in a piece that I don't think he's as yet. There's a lot of frenetic activity, a lot of energy to get the spotlight on him, but I don't think he's significantly, if at all, improved America's strategic position in the world. But I don't know where you stand on that question.
I think that's right. I mean, the greatest disappointment would be Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
Because Putin is doing literally every week more and more and more damage, and more Ukrainians are dying. And the position Trump is taking is the war should come to an end. Both sides should stop.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't a natural phenomenon. This is an invasion. This is an act of aggression.
Mm-hmm.
This is murder
by
Putin. And the president seems unable to say that.
Mm-hmm.
You hear her say things like, I'm not very happy with that. Doesn't cut it.
Yeah, right. And you're waiting to see, okay, then what? Uh-huh. And there's a core.
And we're still waiting.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit later about the Republican Party and where it stands on these issues. But there's still a core of voices like you're not alone, that say this as well.
I would say if you look at the Senate, 53 Republicans. I mean, there's Josh Hawley and there's Mike Lee and there's Rand Paul, and there are 50 others who are pretty traditional Republicans.
Right. Yeah. Let's shift gears to the Middle East. And again, this episode is coming out on the second anniversary of October 7th. Where were you on October 7th? You remember?
White House.
You were at the White House?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I thought you were
No.
I was talking about 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
Where was I on October 7th? I was home, and I woke up at 6 o'clock and turned on my phone, and there were a million emails.
Yeah.
I thought, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And of course, it didn't take long to find out.
Yeah. So this episode's coming out 2 years after that. I remember I was at a Middle East Institute Track 2 discussion in the region in Muscat, Oman. And what we were talking about, and it was the things, I'll take you back to that moment. It was after Mohammed bin Salman was interviewed by Bret Baier on Fox News. And it was in the afterdraft of that where people were expecting even more openings possible.
Sure.
And then flew to Turkey and participated in a U.S.-Russia dialogue. And that day was just blown up by just the breaking news. And it's still, to this day, I think, obviously hard for Israelis, for Palestinians, but I think a lot of people have a connection to that part of the world to fully absorb 2 years later, not only what happened on that day, but then all of the travesties and atrocities and everything that's happened since then.
I think the idea that one of the motivations for Hamas was to try to block normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia is quite logical, because I agree with you that was the direction things were going in. Whether it was going to take a week or a year or 2 years, that's the direction things were going in.
Yeah.
And they have significantly slowed that down.
Yeah. What's your snapshot 2 years later? Because I know you're a stalwart supporter of Israel and have been through and through your whole career in life. Were you surprised that Israel was this vulnerable at that moment in time and seemingly not prepared on October 7th?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this line about they all had the conception of what, I think that's all correct. I think they should eventually have, a national commission of inquiry, as they did after 1973.
Right.
But, there are books out about it now. There are a million articles about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are great mysteries that are still unknown. And they were vulnerable in a way that I think shocked everybody in the Middle East.
Right.
I mean, Israeli, Arab, Hamas, IDF.
Yeah.
And that shock I think explains why Israel is doing what it's doing to make sure that never happens again.
And do you think 2 years later, it's restored a semblance of strategic deterrence against its adversaries? Because it's done a lot, the whole litany of what it's done in the campaign in Gaza. But I think equally important is the taking out of Hezbollah's leadership and its capabilities, down but not out. Iran, important, I think, exchanges that were sort of constrained in 2024 and then June of 2025. But the Houthis are still there. There's still, the axis of resistance down, but not fully out in my view. But do you think Israel itself, is it just around the corner from restoring strategic deterrence, or does it already have it?
I think they have. I think they have. I think if you look at their borders, they've now, in a sense, protected their borders. There will be no attack from Hezbollah in Lebanon. There will be no attack from Assad in Syria.
Right.
There will be no attack from Hamas in Gaza.
Yeah.
So, yes, they are vulnerable in one way. The Houthis is an annoyance rather than a tremendous vulnerability. They're vulnerable to the Iranian ballistic missile program.
Right.
And that, it's a great concern.
Do you, vulnerabilities, not just from a security sense, but also the political and diplomatic hits it's taking. And I think, especially over the last year, and including, and I know you had an excellent discussion with Michael Makovsky on the Jinsa podcast recently. People should just listen to your views on Israel's strike against the Hamas leadership in Doha. Where do you think Israel stands in terms of the potential it faced at that moment I talked about before October 7th of true regional integration? You and I have met with Saudis in some of the same meetings and things like this. Do you think it's closer or further away from that potential?
It's further away. How much further away? I think we should not attempt to measure while the war is on, because things are going to change 6 months, 12 months after the war, when people are no longer seeing those things every time they turn on Al Jazeera.
Right.
It'll be different. But right now, it's further away.
Yeah. How do you see the broader, beyond sort of Israel, Hamas, where do you see the broader strategic picture of the Middle East today? So if, say, 7-8 years ago during the boycott, there was a fracture between sort of the pro-Islamist Muslim Brotherhood camp and those who were fighting it, what's the structure of, how would you describe to a student who wants to understand the Middle East today? I mean, certainly Israel is dominant and shaping dynamics, but that's produced some counter reactions, as we saw in the Arab sort of moves, partners of Israel and things like this. So where do you see it today?
I think the question was whether what I guess I'd call the responsible Arab governments and Israel and the United States were going to be the dominant powers in the region, or Iran and its allies, many of whom are terrorist groups that it supports. That was the question.
Yeah.
Through the actions of Israel after October 7th and the United States bombing of Iran, we've answered the question about pivoting to Asia ourselves. Israel's answered a substantial portion of the rest of it. It's quite clear who the dominant power in the region is. It's the United States and our allies. Right. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not the axis of Iran, Russia, China. So we are on the dominant side of this. Again, to capitalize on that in the middle of this war is going to be impossible. But after the war, I think we'll see that come together better.
Given what you said earlier about the second Trump term, sort of chaos and things like this, what you are describing is something that I would think is a bit more akin to some sort of broader diplomatic strategy or bigger idea that essentially we've taken, and Israel has taken, some huge hits against our adversaries. And it's one thing to destroy and defeat your adversaries on the battlefield. It's another thing to actually win the peace. Do you have a notion, a sense that either in the region or in the Trump White House or somewhere, policy planning at state or something like this, do people have a big idea about where this all goes?
I would say they have no idea about where Gaza goes. But on the broader question that you raised, because I think it's not complicated. We want Israel and the Gulf Arab states and Jordan and Egypt to get along and to be on our side in the world and to work together economically and militarily. That it's a simple idea.
Right.
And I think it's a widely understood idea in the administration.
Last question on the Middle East before we talk more about your long career and the lessons learned from it, which we'll talk about the Middle East some more, I'm sure. True or false? Elliott Abrams and Rob Malley now have the same position on where things will land. And I saw your Mosaic piece. People should read it. But in the broad contours, maybe you approached it from a different starting point, as you articulate, but is your endpoint, and basically describe what your endpoint is on the Israel-Palestine. You're not a two-stater.
No. What you're referring to is a book by Rob Malley and Hussein Aga that says that, among other things, two states are not going to happen. That's over, guys. Get over it. It is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. They do raise the possibility of the Jordanian option, let's call it, which I've been talking about for at least 10 years. So, yeah,
it's like a light confederation.
We're moving in the same direction.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a real confederation.
But you don't start from the same point.
That's for sure.
And he's a friend of yours. I mean, you're friendly.
Rob is a friend.
Yeah, and that's what,
do not like what happened to him in the Biden administration at all. I think it's indefensible.
What happened to him?
I mean that his security clearance was taken away.
Yeah.
And he was fired. And he has never been charged with anything, and no one has ever explained to him, ever, what happened. So that's the kind of thing that shouldn't happen in America.
Yeah.
Where a bureaucracy just says, you've done something wrong. You must leave. What did I do wrong?
Yeah. No.
Nobody talks. Nobody says.
I understand they dropped whatever.
I think that's right. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that we used to call McCarthyite tactics from the 1950s, really.
Yeah.
That should not happen. If someone has done something wrong, accuse him. Tell him what it is. Let him clear his name.
Yeah.
This is not right.
Yeah, we'll get into this a little bit because it is a bureaucracy, a bureaucratic problem, but I actually think it's part of our political culture and the media culture too, because there were people, I think, all throughout, whether you weren't one of them, I don't think, but people who were skeptical of the Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA, and people...
Well, I was against the JCPOA, straight out. I wasn't skeptical. I was against it.
But you never vilified him or his credentials for it.
We were friendly.
Yeah, but others have.
Actually, it's a lesson. I hated Rob Malley and had never met him. Sure, because of all his positions on Iran and everything else. Had never met him.
Yeah.
And then we did a debate at Princeton, and I thought, wow, this guy's completely honest intellectually.
Right.
It's a great person to debate with.
Yeah.
And then we talked, we had dinner, and we disagree on almost everything.
Right.
But we're friendly.
But that's a key point for the younger listeners, especially, and well, even older. I mean, look what's going on with our politics here. Is get to know people. That human touch matters so much. Let's shift to your career, and I don't even know where to begin. You were Deputy National Security Advisor for George W. Bush. You had senior positions, in your 30s or 40s?
30s in Reagan.
In the for the Western Hemisphere, and then we're going to talk mostly about the Middle East here, but you're open to bring up Venezuela or anything you've done in the
I am. I mean, I was Assistant Secretary for Human Rights.
Yes.
For 3 years.
When we had that.
And for
right? We don't have that position anymore. Is that right? Secretary Rubio is sort of, I think he's getting around it.
Trying. It may actually be something that only Congress can do, but there's certainly nobody filling it.
Yeah.
I started when I was, 27, 28 years old, working on the Hill.
How'd you get there? That's where I want to start. What's the spark? What motivated you to get into this in the 70s?
I was always interested in foreign affairs. I was not interested in, housing policy, economics, any of that.
Why? What was the spark for you? I'll tell you.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, for me, I was in a small town in Pennsylvania. We were winning the Cold War, and then we won. It was the late 80s. And you were, I was basically, when you were starting your career, I was starting preschool. Sorry. You got a few years on me. And I was just animated by the fall of the Berlin Wall. We were winning. The wind was at our sails. And were you in the H.W. Bush administration?
I was not.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So you were just interested in the war.
I don't know. Where'd you grow up? I grew up in New York City. And I can only tell you that I don't know when I thought of a career in this, but I said to a college roommate of mine a few years ago that, maybe in law school, and he said, well, stop. When you were in college, you wanted to do this. So at some point early on, high school or college, I thought, this is what I really want to do. I did try practicing law after law school. I did it for a year and a half. It bored me to death.
Yeah.
And I had worked in law school for Scoop Jackson's campaign.
Remind us all who Scoop Jackson
Senator
is.
Henry M. Jackson was the senator from Washington State, and at various times chairman of what we now call the Energy Committee, the Armed Services Committee, He was a Cold Warrior. He was a kind of Truman, Johnson, Kennedy Democrat.
Right. And you were a Democrat.
And I was exactly that. I was a kind of Cold War Democrat. And so I worked on his presidential campaign when he ran in 1972. I was in law school. And I graduated and tried practicing law. I didn't like it and said to him, if you're going to run in 1976, I want in. And he said, fine, you're in.
Great.
Come down here. So I moved to Washington.
Wow. So one thing led to another. So again, the lesson for the future generations is it's okay to dabble, but it's also important to keep your networks alive, right? Like you tried law, wasn't for you.
Right.
Why wasn't it for you?
You know, the reason is that it was, I'm sorry to all lawyers out there, trivial in the sense that, okay, there's a lawsuit. Bethlehem Steel is suing Republic Steel.
Yeah.
And you're on one side or the other. I don't care who wins.
Yeah.
I'm not at either of those companies. I mean, that's how I really want to spend my life.
Right.
I didn't see it. I thought this other stuff, it's so much more important and more interesting.
And you're more of a big picture guy too, right? Like you can get into the details and weeds on stuff, but lawyers have to follow a lot of that.
Oh,
stuff.
You
can do both.
I could do that, but I thought
you didn't love it.
I want to spend my life this way.
Yeah. So you worked for how many presidents?
3. Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and then Donald Trump.
And who was the most effective? Who was the most effective on foreign policy?
Well, you'd have to say Reagan. I mean, in the sense that you're coming to the end of the Cold War there.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Right.
So I think in terms of current American history, Reagan.
And are you one of these Republicans who credits just simply Reagan for this? Because I had Ed Luce, who has a terrific new book. I don't know if you've read it on Brzezinski.
And not.
Yeah. And Brzezinski actually, though a Democrat, endorsed H.W. Bush for president over Dukakis, was heterodox in his own sort of way. And you don't buy that theory.
Well, look, it's not a one man. No one person can do this.
Yeah.
Does Margaret Thatcher get credit? Yeah. Does the Pope get credit? Yes.
Yeah.
Does Gorbachev get credit? Yes. It doesn't happen without Ronald Reagan, though.
Yeah.
It could have happened without Thatcher.
Yeah.
And it could have happened, I think, without the Pope.
Right.
It couldn't have happened without Reagan.
And it being the collapse of the Soviet
Union and us, as Margaret Thatcher put it, winning the Cold War without firing.
So Reagan's the most effective. I'm told that he was also the funniest. He had did he have the filthiest of jokes? Is that right?
Well, yes and no. Reagan had what?
Can you tell him?
No.
Okay.
But they weren't filthy. That's the thing about Reagan.
Okay.
For example,
they were blue.
Reagan,
he worked blue.
Yeah. He would never, ever use foul language.
Good. Wow. That's novel.
And the jokes were, I would say, sex jokes, blue jokes, but never, I'd say never dirty jokes. There wasn't that sense about them.
I'm just curious why you can't tell us now. It's okay.
If
maybe
he
later.
wanted to have told them in public, he'd have told them in public, and we're in public now. So
yeah, I got you. No. And what was George?
And let me just say, by the way, Reagan was like George W. Bush. Maybe this is a Republican thing. When I worked for George W. Bush in the White House, I went to the Oval Office a lot. There was a rule, or there were 2 rules: no foul language in the Oval Office, coat and tie. This is the Oval Office of the President of the United States. If you were called in on a Sunday, because the President had to sign something, if you had to go to the residence part of the White House, you would go in shorts, blue jeans, whatever.
Yeah.
Oval Office, coat and tie.
Yeah.
And I don't think Democrats do that. It's funny because you remember the series Designated Survivor?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland. He's in the Oval Office a lot, wearing a sweater. And the first time I saw that, I thought, guy's a Democrat, really.
Yeah.
They call him an independent in this series. But.
So what you're saying, if Kid Rock was around, if Kid Rock was, he's not coming into the Oval with Reagan there.
No.
Right?
And if basketball teams came to, after they win the NBA, you get
coat and tie.
And I actually think it matters because you need to remind yourself where you are and the weight that's on his shoulders and your shoulders.
Yeah. So, Elliott, how dare you come to my podcast wearing jeans? Okay.
And a white shirt. I did wear a white shirt.
Where's the tie? I'm kidding. So what's it like actually being in the Oval? Like, and we talked a lot. Like, we've been friends, I think. Where I call you a friend. You know, if
Yes,
you call me,
long time.
yeah, a long time,
Years.
15, 20 years. What's it like to brief the president? I mean, you're a smart, self-assured, experienced man, but like you're there talking to the leader of the free world. Yeah.
It varies.
Uh-huh.
For example, Reagan asked many fewer questions than George W. Bush, who asked a lot of questions.
He was a reader too, like George.
Well, I mean, the thing about, I remember you would do papers. Let's say tomorrow, President Mubarak of Egypt is coming in, or the king of someplace. And so you do the prep.
Yeah.
Here's what he will ask you. Here's what we think you might ask him.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on in country X. And I would go into the Oval Office, say, 30 minutes before, let's say, a meeting with Mubarak for what we call the pre-brief.
Right.
And the president would say, I'm not going to ask him your fourth question. And I'm standing there thinking, what in hell with my fourth question? But he's read the stuff since I wrote it.
Right.
He did a lot of homework. When he went back to the residence at, say, 6:30 p.m., people say, oh, guys, real early. You got hours of homework.
Yeah, no, this is also, I heard about Obama. I worked a junior staff position for President Clinton with Rob Malley and Ken Pollack and our colleague here at MEI and things like this. These guys are readers. That's not what Trump is. He's people.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, people have said he's post-literate in the sense that he just doesn't absorb information that way. He prefers to get it through verbal briefings, conversations, cable TV and things like that. Was that your experience with President Trump when you worked for him, or did you not have much face time?
I didn't have much face time with him at all, but that's what I heard.
Yeah.
With Bush, there was a lot of back and forth, and you could challenge, and you could say, I wouldn't do that, Mr. President. I think that's a mistake. And he would never say, what? How dare? No, he wanted to know why. Why do you think that? So it was a real discussion, much more than with Trump or with Reagan.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've worked, and we're going to talk a little bit about the politics in a little bit and the shifts in politics, but in your policy career, when you look back on the expanse, and I know it's hard to do because you've served in many tumultuous times post 9/11, you were the senior director at the White House and became deputy national security advisor, working on like various efforts to get Israelis and Palestinians, like so many episodes. What's the most memorable, standout, positive experience in your career? Elliott Abrams, this is your
positive experience. Boy, that is a very hard question.
I gave it to you in advance, man.
I know that. And as I read it, I couldn't answer it either.
Yeah.
It would be building the relationship, which existed, but building the relationship, I would say, between George Bush and Ariel Sharon, between the U.S. government and the Israeli government.
What year was this?
We're talking about 2003, 4, 5.
So post second Intifada and then beyond to the Gaza disengagement.
And you got second Intifada, and then efforts to build a Palestinian state. Arafat's rejection. Of course, we start with Arafat's rejection of the Clinton proposals at Camp David in 2000. And then we got to rebuild. And then Arafat dies. And what do we do about Arafat's death? What do we do about Gaza and Sharon's proposal, which he then did to get out of Gaza? I mean, those years were tremendous because I had a lot of time with the president. I had a lot of time with Sharon.
Right.
I'd go to Israel and sit alone with him in the prime minister's office and talk about U.S.-Israel relations, his plans for Gaza. I was actually the first American he told, I'm going to get out of Gaza.
Wow. He did that in 2005, but when did he
got
tell
out?
You that?
In August 2005. He told me in 2003.
Wow.
In Rome.
Interesting.
We had been trying all sorts of things. Arafat had basically blunted all of them.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what's next. So he couldn't come to the U.S. And Condi Rice, National Security Advisor, couldn't go to Israel at that point. And so she said, where is he? And we knew that he was going on a state visit to Rome. And she said, go to Rome and talk to him.
Interesting.
In Rome. So I did. And that was a hell of an experience too, kind of getting sneaked in the back of the Rome Hilton because nobody was supposed to know that I was actually on this secret.
So what flight did you take out? You took
I
a
took
commercial?
a regular commercial flight under my own name.
Did you have a mustache on?
Some Mossad guy met me in the parking lot.
Okay.
And took me back through some back stairs to Sharon's suite, which was a beautiful big presidential suite, I guess. And I thought, I'm going to get the best Italian food that this hotel can make.
Right.
And we sat down to dinner, and they brought in a tray of cold cuts.
Oh.
And so that was disappointing. And then there was one type of meat that was round and pink.
Yeah.
I thought,
what is it?
What is this? Yeah. This has got to be ham. And how can it be ham? And Sharon is starting to cut. And I said to him, Prime Minister, what meat is that?
Yeah.
And he replied, Elliott, sometimes it's better not to ask.
So he just dug right in.
He dug right in.
Yeah, it could have been, okay, all right. Not kosher, maybe. So that's really cool. So that period, sorry, I want to pause on it. I don't want to take too much time on it, but you were boosting also Salam Fayyad. And people
Absolutely.
and one man who's a dear friend, and I think you talk with him a lot, Ziad Asali, was a key part of those efforts. So going back, I mean, trying to connect it a little bit, you weren't even intent on helping the Palestinians build a state.
We were at that time.
You thought
was clearly American policy.
And that was your view?
And it was at that moment, Arafat was gone.
Yeah.
And there was Fayyad, who was first finance minister.
Yeah.
And then prime minister. And he was a state builder. And I think any American who met him would say, wow, this guy knows exactly what he wants to and how to do it.
Yeah.
And, he explained it all. And he ran for office in the 2006 parliamentary election and got 2.4% of the vote.
Yeah.
And all the polls, not only that actual vote, but all the polls showed Palestinians weren't so enamored of the idea of building a state. Nor obviously were Israelis of having a Palestinian state. The polls from 2006 and the polls from 2025, essentially the same.
Yeah.
The idea going back to the 1930s and maybe before has been, on the part of Palestinians, has been much more to destroy the Jewish state than it is to build a state of their own from the bottom up.
Yeah, this is where, again, I lived and worked in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, 1995 to 98, with the National Democratic Institute. And this is one of these organizations Tammy Wittes, our mutual friend, now heads, and it's still sort of surviving, we hope, like it's part of that democracy infrastructure. And I think there's a lot more nuance than, especially in your latest Mosaic article and the discussion you had with our friends Danny Pletta and Mark Thiessen, that actually it's more complex than just rejecting Fayyadism and that they want to reject an Israel state. Like when you get outside of the bubble and ordinary Palestinians, there's actually much more of a popular sentiment of live and let live. They want to have autonomy and dignity. I think we're even further away from that because of the war that Hamas started. And it's harder to sort of see the end point. But point being, go ahead.
No, I'm glad you're getting into this here at the Middle East Institute.
Sure.
And I mean, this has become a kind of hot place in the last, I don't know, year or two. It's an important point. Autonomy, yes. Dignity, yes, for sure. Is statehood the only way to achieve it? Is statehood even a way to achieve it, given what else is happening in that part of the world? I think those are fair questions.
No, I think so. And when I look at sort of the discussions I've had, I'm sure you've had as well with some of our key partners, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, countries that Jordan, Egypt, that have agreements or Israel hopes to have agreements, and they likewise someday. I actually think it actually, in some sort of way, has even a symbolic, not the symbolic recognition, which I think is empty and won't likely produce anything. You know, this podcast is coming out after the hijinks we'll see at the UN.
Yep.
But I don't think we're going to see anything that's a major leap forward for the Palestinian people. But I do think that there is a consensus in the Middle East. And one of the gaps that I see missing, and it's changed and it's evolved in U.S. policy, is not recognizing that there's a consensus amongst Arab leaders that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. They're willing to put troops into dangerous places like Gaza and to come up with a conception. And we don't have leadership from either Trump 2.0, nor I don't think the Biden team covered themselves in glory at all for being strategic. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah.
We're 2 years from October 7th. Where's the plan for Gaza? Biden did not develop one.
Nope.
Trump said, oh, everybody will leave and it'll be the Riviera. That's not a plan.
Yeah.
The Arabs have not put forward a plan. The Israelis have one excuse, which they state publicly, which is, if we come up with a plan, it'll immediately be rejected. It can't be an Israeli plan. We could give it to the Americans privately, or maybe the Saudis or Emiratis. But it is striking. 2 years later, there is no real plan. It's amazing.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And it's also the mistake that I think President Biden tried to warn Netanyahu when he went and embraced him physically a week after 9/11. I did that, what you just did, October 7th, but it is the same sort of trauma.
Yeah.
And said, don't do what we did, which is not actually have a clear definition of what the end state is. Before I want to get into the politics and leave enough time on all this, when you look back on this, I know it was hard. It's so hard to encapsulate a 50-year career, best accomplishment, but it's really interesting. It's that early 2000s period where there was hope and you were working on that. Any disappointments, like when you look at when you served and things you wished had done differently or something like that?
I'd say the war in Iraq, and I was not much involved because there was a separate directorate for the war that was handling it, the Defense Directorate. But I was somewhat involved, and I think we made the Bush administration, we made a number of mistakes. One of them was DOD took over the non-military aspects of it, the social and political aspects.
Jay Garner, those people.
And then dropped it immediately. And then dropped it immediately. In fact, we were working on parts of it at the White House, the NSC and the OMB, and we were told very early on, unity of command, drop it. We've got it at DOD. And then it turned out that at DOD, the real attitude was, we won the war, we're going home. We don't do this kind of stuff. You do that.
Rumsfeld, right?
Rumsfeld and others. And that was, as it turned out, a gigantic mistake.
Yeah.
A lot of Americans were killed by jihadis coming from all over the world. We didn't stop that from happening.
Yeah.
We didn't, I mean, one vignette, all the jihadis that were coming from Libya, from Pakistan, they didn't cross the border from Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or something, or Iran, Syria.
Yeah.
They flew into Damascus International Airport, and then they were accompanied into Iraq to kill Americans. At one interagency meeting, I said, why don't we bomb the airport?
Yeah, I remember this.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
How can you? I said, I'm not trying to kill people. At 3:30 a.m., you warn Assad, you tell him, knock this off, or if it doesn't stop, you take out a runway. I think we'll have his attention at that point, and he will stop it. Oh, we can't do that. We'll have another war. Can't do that. One guy actually from the Department of Transportation said, these people are killing Americans in Iraq. And this guy said, I think that would violate the rules of the International Civil Aviation Organization. I thought, what world are we living in here?
Yeah.
They're killing Americans.
We're at war. Yeah.
So we made, I think, plenty of mistakes.
Right.
Not mistakes that come after invading Iraq that I like to think were avoidable in that war. You know, the surge came several years later and saved our situation there. But why did that happen? That is, why was it needed? What was happening that got us into a position where we needed a surge or we were going to lose?
It was those early mistakes of dismissing the entire army. I remember I went back to NDI briefly, and I did one of the first public opinion research projects in Iraq in 2003 for them. And people, ordinary Iraqis, we got outside of the bubble, we assembled a team, listened to them, and we briefed the CPA, which the joke in Iraq, CPA was can't provide anything, right? The Coalition Provisional Authority that was supposed to govern the place. But they thought that America was objectively so powerful that why isn't the electricity on? And I was like, well, it's buffoonery, right? They're incompetent. And they thought, no, this is intentional. And this actually helped plant the seeds. I can send you that report. It was one of the most original, like I did at a Washington Post op-ed. It was but how do you wake sort of people's consciousness of you're making a big mistake here in the Pentagon or other places where you're sitting at the White House, right?
Yeah.
And you're in that position nominally, but you didn't have the ability to change that.
And for a while, the president didn't. That is, what he was hearing was, these are terrorists.
Yeah.
And we're fighting the terrorists, and it's going fine. And it's going fine.
And we're building the Iraqi army.
And this goes on for, I don't know, 2 years.
Yeah.
And you know the story that when this was turned around, it wasn't by the generals, it wasn't by the Pentagon. It was by General Jack Keane, retired, who would come into the White House ostensibly to see Vice President Cheney, and would be sneaked around the back hallway to see the president.
Yeah.
And tell the president, this is an insurgency by Iraqi. So this is not a bunch of terrorists. It's an insurgency by a large part of the population. That's why we're losing.
Yeah.
The whole conception is wrong. And he turned Bush around. Bush then did the surge that turned around the military situation. But there are a lot of very unhappy lessons to learn from that.
That's a big one. So last question on this, and we'll turn to politics. I was thinking about this, and yesterday I was at the Phillies baseball game with my colleague Greg Gause, and I'm such a nerd.
Who's a wonderful, wonderful scholar.
Yeah, he's a great scholar. He's got a great paper out, which he's thinking of turning into a Middle East Journal article, and I was giving him my thoughts on it. And he was wrestling with this question of whether the U.S., and it's a little academic here, during this period that you served in the first 25 years of the century, essentially, was a hegemon in the region, or was this a unipolar moment and things like this? But the bottom line, to distill it down to a practical question I wanted to ask you, I think quite objectively, America at the end of the 2000s, because of Reagan's victory and then Clinton, I think handling, you may have different views on it, but handling quite well, we were unrivaled in our power. Sure. And then in a 25-year period, we actually squandered a lot of that power in the Middle East. Part the Iraq War, you can blame that simplistically, and you may disagree with that notion, but squandered in the sense of not even like objective power. Military power, we're still unrivaled. Economic power, we're still unrivaled. But the divisions that we produced ourselves in this society, which I actually think is a strategic deficit, meaning the left versus right, which
in our own society.
Yeah, in our own society. And the fact that, for instance, someone like J.D. Vance, our vice president, or Tulsi Gabbard, who is an unusual director of national intelligence, to say the least, who ran for president and as a Democrat from the left in 2020, and now is doing all sorts of things. They have a common thread, which is service on the ground in these long wars. And that, to me, and the bigger question, sorry, it's a big windup. Speaking of baseball analogies, sorry for the long windup. Why did we not be able to control and produce the outcomes that we stated we wanted to, either in Iraq or on the Iran file or on Israel-Palestine?
I think on Afghanistan, we failed because we probably had the wrong goal. The goal should have been limited to defeating the Taliban and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Not changing Afghan society overnight or over a 5-year period or over a 10-year period. That wasn't our goal, and shouldn't have been our goal, and we failed in it. For a long time, it looked as if we were succeeding, but we failed. I do wonder, we'll never know, is it possible that if we had gotten out more slowly and not abandoned the Afghan government that we had created, that they would have been able to resist the Taliban? Is it conceivable? We'll never know the answer to that, but I do think the way you got out was shameful.
And you agree it's a shared, I mean, it was a Trump deal, Pompeo, but Biden need not have followed the letter of the agreement. I thought it was a big street. And actually, if you look objectively, Biden's presidency went underwater in the fall. Right then.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And the buck stops with the president, and at that point, it's Biden.
Yeah.
Globally, I don't think we squandered anything in the sense that there was a unipolar moment.
Yeah.
It was never going to last. Look at China. We didn't, build China. China built China. And it was not possible that country with its population was not going to be at some point a great power. Yeah, I think it was a mistake to let them in the World Trade Organization and to let them cheat and cheat and cheat. That would have delayed it maybe, but the unipolar moment was never going to last.
Right.
I don't blame anybody for its passing. On Iraq, just one word.
Mm-hmm.
I think the outcome in Iraq would have been different and would still be different were it not for Iran. Iraq has had election after election after other real elections, not phony elections like Russia or Iran.
Yeah.
What's preventing them from consolidating a democracy in which Shia, Kurd, Sunni fight democratically? Who got what, when, how. Tell you what, I'll give you a new dam if you let me. What stops it is Iran and the Shia militia groups that are willing to kill to maintain undue amounts of power. Still true today. If Iran, let's say the regime collapsed tomorrow and they changed their view of Yemen and of Iraq and stopped supporting militia groups, I think Iraq would consolidate into a fairly decent democracy over a short period, like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I actually think that when I look at successive Democratic and Republican administrations, this fixation on the tools that we have from the military and intelligence standpoint, meaning like how many boots we have on the ground and debate, and I understand why that animates it, but the absence of the debate about the the political strategy, the diplomatic strategy, and then to push back on Iran, right? It's verboten in some of my circles, Democratic and others, to say that they're a malign force, but they have been. When I first went in on that research project in 2003, there was a strong sense of Iraqi nationalism, like across the board. And this was pre everything the CPA did and set things up. People just wanted to own their own country and did not want to be dominated by a neighbor or by the United States or anyone else. And that's what happens. And my point on this is that I don't think our tools are that sharp in terms of pushing back against adversaries in the political and diplomatic realm like Iran. And I actually think we're unilaterally disarming ourselves in the last 6-7 months, when even though we're getting rid of some things that need to get rid of, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, we did this in the Cold War, and the Cold War was a Cold War.
Right.
We did not have a war with Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
We used U.S. Information Agency, and we used Radio Free Europe. And we fought the Soviets, and we helped bring about the end of the Soviet Empire without a war. And now those tools are being destroyed. I mean, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Voice of America, the democratic tools, that is to say, International Republican Institute, National Democratic Institute,
right,
National Endowment for Democracy. This administration is trying to destroy all of that. And I think that's incredibly short-sighted.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time. You got a dog. And I know what's the dog's name?
Daisy.
Daisy, beautiful. But can I get a few more minutes?
Yes, sir.
Time? Right. Let's shift to politics.
My late wife used to say, just remember, dogs can't tell time.
Yeah, exactly. But we come home, Charlie's like, oh my God. And he loves you so much. He's like, you're gone for like 5 minutes or you're gone for like two weeks.
It's like people have dogs.
Yeah, there you go. Truman, in your DC, get a dog. You started your career, as we talked about, working not only for Scoop Jackson. You didn't talk about Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who, from senator from New York, great intellect, right? And yes. Democrat, but
like Jackson, what I'd call a hardline Democrat.
But you spent most of your career working for Republican administrations of various stripes. What changed? Was it you? Or the political spectrum?
People like me in that situation always say it wasn't me, it was, and that's what I'm going to say. I don't think the foreign policy views I had when I worked for Senator Jackson or Senator Moynihan are any different from the ones that I have today. I think the difference is, once upon a time, the Democratic Party was people like Truman and Kennedy and Johnson, and it was not the party of George McGovern, and it was not the party of Barack Obama. So my view is that it was really the Democratic Party abandoning what do we want to call it, Cold War liberalism that had characterized it from, let's say, 45 to, I don't know, 76 campaign, maybe.
You don't think Clinton had any of this?
I think Clinton was a moderate, a centrist. Which
Split the difference.
Why he won. And I think the same is true of Hillary Clinton, also a centrist, pretty hard line on many foreign policy issues. And this is changing. I mean, the both parties are changing, but
Yeah.
on foreign policy issues, to me, the Democratic Party was moving to the left,
Yeah.
and it was stopped by Bill Clinton, who said, we're not going to win elections on the left, and dragged it back to the center. But it's moving left again.
But on the foreign policy issues back then, he was pretty centrist internationalist. He expanded NATO and did a lot of things that...
Who are you talking about?
Clinton.
Yeah,
President Clinton.
absolutely.
Yeah. And was backing of that. We would never see that today, right? You won't see it in a Republican administration. We certainly won't under Trump. There's questions of whether he'll actually abandon NATO.
I don't know what happens after Trump. I think that's a very interesting question. The Democrats seem to me to be moving left on foreign policy issues. If you look at senators who once upon a time, I would say, were dead center, like Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's vice presidential nominee, ran with him. I think he's moved left. I think you get people like Chris Van Hollen in Maryland who moved way left. What's the Republican Party going to be after Trump? You've got 50 moderate centrist Republicans in the Senate. If J.D. Vance is the nominee, that's a Trumpy nomination, who I assume follows Trump lines on foreign policy issues.
Yeah.
What about after that? Do both parties move back to the center? Did the Democrats find another Bill Clinton instead of a Mamdani?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But do you think, despite this disarray within the parties, you and I met in 2010? It was pause a little bit on this because I think the whole environment has changed, and we met even a little bit before then. But I had you on a panel in 2010 on Hezbollah at Center for American Progress. Do you remember this?
I deny everything.
No.
I don't remember.
It was a book about Hezbollah, and you came over, and it was actually a little bit of a debate inside this center-left organization about how could you, like you get this a lot, right? You got it from Ilhan Omar in 2019 when you were serving in the Trump administration. So how do you view sort of just the nature of discourse when you talked about like how people, it's sort of certainly open to more all-comers, right?
But it's changed a lot for the worse, I think. I mean, when I came to Washington, admittedly, it's 50 years ago, I'd say a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Politics was on ideological or policy lines much more than mere party lines. If you look at, say, Senator Jackson's votes, strong Democrat, ties to the labor movement, on foreign policy issues, he would get as many Republicans voting with him as Democrats. It was all across party lines. It was, well, what do you believe in? What do you think is the best foreign policy? And that was true of social life, too.
Yeah.
And it isn't true of social life now. I think there's much greater division. That's a Republican evening, dinner, party, event. That one's for the Democrats.
Yeah.
I think there's much less comity. Now, the president makes it worse with the language he uses. Democrats make it worse because everything's fascism. Everything is the end of the American Republic. There's no such thing as, well, we just disagree on that.
Yeah.
That's not the way it used to be.
Yeah. If I could add a third culprit to it, and you can disagree with it, is the Republicans, especially electeds, that know what Trump is doing is wrong, and they still vote for this nominee or that initiative and then don't speak up. And I actually think that'll change because politics are politics so long as we have open elections and Trump has gone underwater faster than any president. I think it would be wise, not that anyone's listening to Catulus in the Republican Party on their political strategy, but it would be wise to actually for internationalists to think, okay, there are key issues that where he's going to likely sell out U.S. values and interests and security interests in the long run. China's the big open question for me of where he's going to go. And I'm still this hopeless sort of, we can rebuild the vital center, despite sort of the disarray in the Republican and Democratic Party.
I worked for Senator Moynihan, who was elected in 1976. So
yeah,
joins the Senate in January 77. His first vote was against a nominee of President Carter, the new Democratic president, to head the arms control and disarmament.
Amazing. Why?
Refused. Well, the guy was, from his point of view, essentially took the position that the United States and Russia were morally the same, we're both building arms and we should stop.
Yeah.
Apes on a treadmill was the expression that was used. Moynihan didn't see that way. He thought the Russian regime, the Soviet regime, was evil.
Yeah.
And comparisons between them and us should never be made by a high government official. So he voted no.
So he was principled in that way. Is there a Daniel Patrick Moynihan in today's GOP Senate?
There have been very, very, very few people who voted no on a nominee. There's one or two examples, I think.
Yeah.
But people are afraid that there's going to be a primary fight. They're going to, what's now turned into a verb instead of a noun. They're going to primary me.
Yeah.
Admittedly, when presidents new, you tend to give them more of the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
But no, I think that's right. And when you see people who obviously know better voting for someone like Tulsi Gabbard, it's a mistake. It's a mistake for the country, for the government. In the long run, mistake for the president.
Yeah.
And you remember that amazing exchange where I've forgotten even what the subject was. I think it was probably bombing Iran. She said something, and the president said, I think I'm quoting here, "It doesn't matter what she said."
My director.
That's incredible.
It's insane. Last question on this partisan policy stuff. You and I, we met earlier, but we were on a bipartisan Egypt working group.
Yeah.
Is it still worth trying to do these sorts of things, despite the disarray and the divisions? And I did some projects when I was at CAP with AEI, books with Daniel Putka and Michael Rubin, and I'm really mixed on it, honestly. Like, yeah. I think, okay, the intent was good, but the culture, the media and politics culture went in a completely different direction. Should we just give up and go to our tribes? Or
I don't think so. I think, tactics may differ. For example, if the goal then was to get a senator of the president's opposing party, whoever the president was, to say publicly, my president is wrong on this and I demand, that's not going to happen.
Uh-huh.
But what still might happen is if you can get to some of the senators to say this policy is a mistake,
yeah,
that they can talk to Rubio, or they can talk to Vance, the president, the chief of staff, and say, this is a mistake. I'm not going to, go public and say so, but listen to me. This is not good for the president, and here's why.
Yeah.
I think that can still happen.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll keep working on it. Now, let me close out just a few more minutes, getting to know you, and then some advice for the future. We got a little bit already. What's the best musical concert live that you've ever been to?
Oh, Jesus.
I've got on good information, you went to a Bonnie Raitt concert.
And to a Bonnie Raitt concert when we're recording this just a few weeks before. Yeah. Of course, Bonnie Raitt's 75, so she's in my group, right?
Yeah, good. And that was in Western Mass? Or?
Yeah, it was in Tanglewood.
Beautiful. Summer night.
Yeah.
Nothing better than that.
It was very beautiful. I'm trying to think. This will embarrass me probably in front of your audience. The Beach Boys.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Decades ago.
Yeah. So Beach Boys are good. We're getting nods of approval from the young folks in the room, Elliott. You see that? There's a great...
It wasn't clear to me they'd heard of the Beach Boys.
No, these are... well, I try. There's a documentary on Disney about the Beach Boys you've got to see, and the musical genius of Brian Wilson and things like that. Do you have any hidden talents?
None.
There you go. A good answer. Last.
I'm a very good dog owner.
You're a good dog owner. So what advice... We've got some young folks in the room, work here at MEI, help us produce this podcast. What advice would you give to someone who's a student, comes to your office, lucky enough to have an informational interview? What should they do to follow in your footsteps?
I'd say a couple of things. Number one, study and read history.
History.
Yeah, I'm not so big on political science as a major as opposed to history.
What was your major?
Government, political science. And if I had to do over again,
it would be history.
It would be history.
I was a history major.
Well, you were right.
Yeah.
And I find myself reading from graduating from college to now, reading history to try to educate myself. So yeah, that's for a second, get involved. Mm-hmm. Nobody thinks that you're going to graduate from college and run a presidential campaign. Get involved in whatever way you can at the precinct level, at the congressional office level. Just do something. Make your presence known. Write. That would have been a dumb thing to say 25 years ago, because how are you going to break into the New York Times? But there are a million websites now.
Yeah.
There are ways to get something out there. So that final thing would be, do it. That is, if you have an opportunity to work in the government, do it. And if you have that opportunity, people are going to say, well, what have you done? That is, did you ever do anything to help the party, whatever party is yours?
Yeah.
Have you ever written anything? You need to be able to show something. And the difference between, no, I never, I was busy, I was bored, and having, deputy precinct captain write a letter that says, she was great. She really showed up. To be able to show, well, I wrote these for the college paper, or I wrote these for this website of young foreign policy analysts, and then do it. I mean, you can take the government job. Usually I advise people that you can start on the Hill, try that, because there are hundreds and hundreds and, 535 members. Everybody has a staff of 10 or 20 or 30 or 50.
Right.
So there are a lot of jobs. Take whatever you can get. You can move laterally once you're on the Hill much more easily than you can get a job on the Hill. So just try to get in there and start. And if you don't like it,
move on.
Move on.
It's okay. Well, that's brilliant advice. Elliott, thank you for sharing so much of your insight from your vast career. Thanks to Daisy and her patience. She's waiting at home, waiting for dinner and things like that. And thanks for indulging me with all of these questions that weren't just in the moment. I hope it's something that people listen to and take a lot away from. I know I did in the conversation. So appreciate you coming here.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Thanks
you to you and MEI.
Great, thanks. That's all the time we have this week. Again, thank you to our listeners for tuning in, to our colleagues for their work on this week's episode. You can follow MEI on X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and subscribe to our email newsletters for the latest analysis and information about upcoming events. I'm Brian Katulis. We'll see you all soon.